Hello and welcome to Tips for Using the new NIH Biosketch Common forms. This is a short video from the short video series from Transcend's Professional Development Core. I'm Mark Williamson. Let's get started. So, what we'll be going over today is the new Biosketch Common form. So the what of this training is going to be on, again, the biographical sketch, which if you're not familiar with, a biosketch or biographical sketch has qualifications and experience for a specific role in a project. So these are going to be needed. The needed. Who needs these? Well, senior and key personnel and other significant contributors to a grant application. And when? Well, if you're going to apply for a grant, if you already have a grant, you need to do a progress report. If you need to have changes in personnel and other major changes on a grant, you're going to need to have biosketches. And so biosketches are important. The reason why they're important is that they show NIH staff and reviewers that you have the skills, the knowledge, and the resources to actually complete the project. So because of that, biosketches are actually kind of like a sleeper form that really can help your application shine by showing off the fact that, yeah, you're going to make the case that you are the right person for the job when it comes to this grant application. So it's really underutilized, and so you really want to tailor it well to the grant application. And you want to make sure you are filling it out correctly, especially given the update. So let's continue on with these tips to actually do that. Now, it's a little convoluted because things have changed recently. So this is a bit of the history. So before January 25th, you could use the older NIH Biosketch and other support format pages. However, after January 25th, you needed to use this thing called now the Common forms for biographical sketch and current and pending other support. And then the NIH Biographical Sketch Supplement. And this was for a variety of scenarios. Now, because this is now past, so we're past January, we're down to February 2026, or whenever this comes out or you're seeing it. So that first half of it is no longer relevant. So we could just cut it down to these four things. Now, and I could simplify this because we don't really need the date. We know that this is now technically should be in effect. And again, you see there's a different submission scenarios, but they all have the same outcomes. We really simplified this down to saying, look, if you're applying for a grant, so application submission, or you have an RPPR, or a GIT submission, or even a prior approval request submission, you're all going to need to use the common forms for biographical sketch and current and pending other support, and then the NIH biographical sketch supplement. So that's what you need to do going forward. All right, with that, let's get a little bit into the actual process of it, the format. So how do you actually do the NIH Biosketch now? Well, on one page, and you'll find some all the links of the websites I use today. On one of the NIH web pages, in the forms directory on specifically the Biosketch, it says they must conform to a specific format. And how you actually do this is you can either use the provided format pages or use this thing called SciENcv. However, on another page, there is a mandate that says that SciENcv must be used. So it's not optional. However, it's further complicated on that same page. That's the Biographical Sketch Common form page. There's this warning that's saying that, yeah, while it's supposed to be in effect, you're supposed to be using that. There's been some complications, so they actually allow for appearance of leniency, that you could still use the old forms, but that leniency eventually will end, presumably around May. And so I guess with some of this conflicting information, a little bit complication, here's my clear-cut advice. Use SciENcv now, if at all possible, or at least start figuring out how to use it, because eventually you will have to use it. All right. Let's see here. speaking of that, how do we actually use SciENcv? And what is it? Well, SciENcv is a science expert network curriculum vitae. It's a researcher profile system for individuals to apply for any federal agency research. And it's available on my NCBI for more the NIH side of things, but this will be applicable. SciENcv will be applicable for like DOE. I believe, I think NASA still uses its own thing. But NSF too would go through this. So if you're looking for an NSF grant, you're going to be using SciENcv as well. Now it's a little convoluted to get through, but you can go start with NIH Commons, and then you have to go to NIH login. But really, NIH wants you to log in through login.gov, and then you can get to my NCBI and then get SciENcv. So it's a little convoluted. That's why I would suggest you figure out how to get access to this now, so you're not struggling through it later. But I mean, it's going to look something like this. So if you're on the webpage at NIH.gov SciENcv, you can click the NIH Commons button. Then it will bring you here, but then it doesn't really want you to sign in here. It wants you to sign in with login.gov. So I hit login.gov. Again, have to sign in, probably do dual factor authorization. And finally, I can get to my NCBI. And you'll have these different floating boxes. Now, SciENcv might not be at the top. I kind of move this to make it more obvious, but it's probably down here, so you might need to scroll down and find it. But then when you find it, you can click the blue Manage SciENcv, and you can get in and start to access it. It's going to have two pieces here. It's going to have my profile, and you can set that up, and then my documents. You can create new documents, edit it, etc. So that's what SciENcv looks like. That's a bit of how you can access it, so you can actually fill out the new common forms. Speaking of that, and we'll actually run through a live demo on the actual website. But for right now that we kind of know where to get to, let's talk a little bit about the forms themselves. So, what are the instructions for the common forms? Well, if you're more like me and you kind of like something to print out and look at, there is a PDF of the instructions for the biographical sketch common forms. You can print that, and that's found in the description to this video. You can find a link to that. And it's going to go through the different things you need to do to fill out in SciENcv. And there's no page limit, but there are certain limitations of like how much material you can add. And the red are going to be the required. So let's go through each of the pieces. First of all, there's the section of identifying information. This is pretty straightforward. You can have your name, persistent identifier. For NIH, that's going to be your ORCID ID. And you need to have it linked to your NIH Commons personal profile. And then you need your position title. So pretty straightforward. Next section, organizational location, also straightforward. You name of your organization, so like your university or whatnot, and then that university or other organization's location. Then professional preparation, which sounds a little odd, but really it's just your education and training. So you're going to be listing in reverse chronological order your degrees, your postdoctoral, your fellowship training, etc. In each entry, you're going to need the name, location, degree received, start date, reception date or expected reception date, and then the field of study. So it's worded a little differently, but this is just your education. Appointments and positions, again, pretty straightforward. Again, in reverse chronological order, all your different appointments and positions. And that covers academic, professional, or institutional. Now, there is a specification that you only need to identify domestic and foreign professional appointments and positions outside your organization for 3 years. You don't need to list all of them. And when we get into the FAQ, we'll see that in more detail. And then for each entry, you need a start, end date, appointment or position title, name of organization, department, and then location. So those are all pretty straightforward. The real meat of this is going to be the products. This is what's going to make your specific biosketch for the specific grant shine. This is a page called products. There's actually 2 lists that you'll provide. There's the first list, which is 5 products closely related to the proposed project. And then a second list of up to 5 other significant projects that are more in line with sort of broader contributions to science. So they don't have to be specifically related. Just show like you're generally good at doing science. Whereas the first one is you're particularly good at doing science that you're specifically applying for with a grant. And so these typically are something like publications. So your published papers, but they could also be presentations, conference papers, and they could be other things like websites, your new business, if you have a business, a patent, etc. Anything that shows, hey, these are the products that I've done in science that fit this grant, either specifically for the first 5 or more broadly. And so that's something you really want to pay attention to. And really, all this is a list. You'll fill this out in more detail and explain it in the supplement. Products continued. Again, while you have those 2 lists, specific federal funding research agencies might have specific additional limitations that you need to keep in mind. You need to follow the policy on hypertext, which essentially means none. We'll see that more details in the FAQ. And each of those products will need to have their names, product title, date of publication, website, other persistent identifier, relevant citation. Though if your product doesn't have those, you can do NA. And you can always clarify or sort of clean up your publications with authors just at all as needed. And then the last 2 things for the common form, you need to have the certification statements, essentially certifying that their information is correct and you're not party to a malign foreign talent recruitment program. And then you also need to have a statement called the Privacy Act and Burden Statement. And the nice thing about filling this in SciENcv is these will be kind of built in, but those need to be involved. So that is the common form for the NIH Biosketch. So to summarize, we have identifying information, organization and location, and professional preparation, appointments and positions, products, certification, and this Privacy Act and Burden Statement. So to run through this pretty quickly, the first 2 are pretty standard, just your information. The last 2, again, are just kind of boilerplate. They'll be standardized too. You don't really have to do too much to that. These will probably stay the same for any grant you apply for. Now, your professional preparation, appointments, and positions are maybe kind of tweakable. I mean, for the most part, they're not. It's just like your education and your appointment, your positions, what your jobs are. But that might be slightly tweakable depending on the application. What was really tailored and really will matter and change across different grant applications is the products. You really want to make sure your products are shining. All right, with that was the Biosketch. Now's the supplement instructions. And again, you can find a link to the PDF of this document. It's going to follow a pretty same format. You're going to need identifying information, organization, location. That's already talked about that. We'll move on. We have our personal statement. This is going to be very tailored. You need to describe why you're suited for the role. And you can't provide citations. You're going to, say in your own word in less than 3,501 characters why you're the best fit. There might be some instructions you can add. You can explain factors that might have affected your past productivity, or if you publish under another name. And then for specific subsets of applications, you might have additional things you might want to add. But personal statement is going to be big. Another thing, you're going to list your honors, relevant academic and professional honors. You can have no more than 15. And then your contributions to science. And so this is something that goes hand in hand with your second list on your products of the NIH Biosketch. And you're going to describe your 5 most significant contributions to science. And you can sort of reference those products on the second list. And now if you're a grad student or postdoc, maybe you don't have 5, you can do maybe 2 or 3, the most significant, if you don't feel like you have enough and you would just be padding. And each contribution, you're going to have the historical background, central findings, influence, and your specific role. This is text only. can't do figures, tables, or graphics. And continued, you can reference, though, you shouldn't be doing any citations. And each contribution to science is 2,000 characters. And I think they talk about them being like a half page somewhere else. So these are essentially sort of the written statements backing up why your contributions to science that you listed in your products are important. And then you have your certification Privacy Act. So summarizing the supplement instructions, identifying information, organization, location, or redundant, you will already have essentially filled that out for the Biosketch, and that's nice. You don't have to do that again in the SciENcv ecosystem. Then there's certification, Privacy Act, emergent, redundant, but the tailored parts are the personal statement, the honors, and the contributions to science. And so again, you really want to carefully craft those for the specific application, the specific grant application, and that will play well with that specifically tailored products list in the Biosketch. All right, with that, let's jump to an online example in SciENcv. And the task I want to walk you through here is how you would update your profile, how you create a new document, update a document to common format if it's in an old format, fill out a common format, and download the document. So let's take a look from there. Okay, here's the SciENcv website. Again, if you did go right here, you're on MyNCBI. Now, it might be down here or something if you haven't moved around, but if you have your SciENcv, you can go manage it. And should fill out your profile. That's probably the first thing. I already filled this out, but this is nice because then you fill this out and then it'll populate some of that generic information for any of your documents. So your name, title, organization, all that information, and save that, and then that'll populate some of those first parts of it. Now, if you want a document, you can just, if you don't already have a document, you can create a new document. And this is really where it's nice here, just for me and Williamson test 26. And you actually can choose a document type, and it depends on what you're doing here. We're talking about NIH, so you want to do your NIH, not the Biosketch, that's the old one. It's a little confusing. You're going to want the Biographical Sketch Common form. And there's going to be like the other stuff. If you're NSF, you can do that. If you're USDA, if you're DOE, you can do that specific one. But for us, we want the Biographical Sketch Common form. And there's different things you can do. You can start with a blank document. That's what we're going to show here. Okay, and so this is going to be the Biographical Sketch Common form. And what's nice about this is it's sort of built in that it has both the Biosketch and then the supplement right here. So you don't have to like juggle two different documents. It's all right here and you fill it all together. And so some of the redundancy is sort of hidden because you don't have to redo it yourself. So the first part here, the nice thing is if you fill out your profile, it'll just populate the identifying information, organization, and location. So you don't have to do anything. Make sure you have your ERA common ID, your persistent identifier from ORCID, all up to date. So that's good. Then you can go to professional preparation. And so that's the education and training. You type this, and then you sort of add one at a time with all the required information. And you can save and add another entry to whatever is required. I haven't filled anything out here, but it's pretty straightforward, I think. Just cancel. Appointment and position. And it'll auto-populate with your most recent position that you had in your profile, but then you can edit that if you need to be, or you can add an appointment. So I could add, statistician from earlier and then fill it out. But just save, cancel. But that's pretty straightforward. Now your products. Now this is where it gets a little interesting. Is you can select products, and where it's going to actually select it from, as if you're is your bibliography in NCBI. It'll also auto-populate your ORCID ID. And so typically you can just pick then your papers. Now, however, if you want to add a product by hand, like maybe it's not a paper, you can do the add product. Though this actually is if you want to add a paper that's on a public citation. So let's see here. What's the easiest thing? Oh, actually, yeah, I think they add a product you actually need to go to manage my bibliography. That's part of the NCBI. And then here you can actually create citations manually. And so like, for example, I had a preprint that I added manually, or maybe I had a presentation that was relevant that I added manually. And then once you have your bibliography, and of course you can have your papers both in PubMed and other places. And then once you have that, then you can find in your bibliography. So for example, so I had this. This is a presentation. I can add that. You know, I can add maybe some of my papers. This is just ad hoc. And then even like a video that I added. And you can add those, continue. And then you can have your other singular products and it'll be the same sort of thing. So there's that. So, and then once you get that done, that's your Biosketch. Then you can go to the sketch supplement. Here's where you add your personal statement. So it's just a text box. And again, the instructions are kind of here and hyperlinks to more information. Your honors, you're going to add piecewise. The honor, name of organization, etc. Those are just lists. Contributions to science. And these are going to be up to 5. And then you can edit, delete them, and you're going to add, you know, the text from here. And then the Certification and Privacy Act is built in. And then when you've filled out everything, you actually can download it and use it as needed, like to submit with your grant application. So that's very quickly going through, but hopefully that was helpful. Now, I want to show a couple other things. Again, say you have the old NIH Biosketch, maybe you filled it out and forgot, or whatnot. If you actually have that, you know, kind of show you, in the old format, you know, so education, training, personal statement, positions, contributions to science, you can actually use a link and actually copy it to a new form. And I've actually already did that. So I have this test earlier and I had a copy of it. So it's now in the new Biosketch Common form. Okay, with that, let's go back to our slides. You saw how SciENcv worked. All right, so if you have questions, the NIH has a good FAQ section on common forms for biographical sketching, current, pending, other support. And in general, a bunch of general categories you can even search. So that's a good resource. I would suggest saving this webpage link. You can find it in the description. If you have questions, you can go and look at it. In fact, why don't we just do that right now? Just look here all together. We can go to the webpage. Again, it's the common forms pending support. We look at the different questions. Like, for example, the featured questions, you know, will grants submitted after January 25th, if they don't use the common forms, will they withdrawn? It says, well, yeah, but then we get that same language that we saw earlier, that there's a periods of leniency. So you can still submit with the older forms, but you should be shifting over to the new ones. You know, same thing for RPPRs or just in time or prior approval. Here's another featured question that's really relevant. There's that language about domestic and foreign professional appointments, why it's only 3 years. Well, those professional appointments are typically things like editorial service for journals, serving on boards, holding offices. So not your main job. And so you don't need to list every single thing you did. You just need to do it for the last 3 years. Whereas something like a actual job, you need to list all your jobs. And again, you can search through a lot of these. There's a lot of good information. What about, you know, where you can find the common forms? Who do you contact if you have questions? What happens if you do not link your ORCID ID? You know, there's going to be an error. Do you have specific SciENcv questions? You know, is the use required? Yes, it is required. So from what I read and the advice I gave is valid. How do you link your ORCID ID, things like that? Or again, I think we saw that. Oh, how do I link it? So you gotta log in and go to account settings. And so yeah, there's all sorts of information here that you can use. So like here's this question. Can I include more citations? No, you can only have 5 citations and 5 other citations. So all right. So that's some FAQs. Closing our time here are some take-home tips when it comes to dealing with the new format for the Biosketch. First of all, get signed into SciENcv. Make sure you can access it and start playing around with it. Once you're in SciENcv, the first thing you should do is update your profile, make sure everything is up to date and looking good. Then I would say create a test copy of the common form to experiment with, to learn your way around it, even maybe filling out all the boring required parts. You should also update your bibliography in something like my NCBI, so your papers that you might reference as your products are available, or if you need to manually enter things, you have it there so you can get that for grant applications. And certainly have a plan to make your tailored sections fit the grant opportunity, to not sleep on that underutilized opportunity to show NIH that you're the right person for the job. So that's going to be your product list in your Biosketch, and then in your supplement, that's going to be your contributions to science, your personal statement, and that's also going to be, what is it? Your honors. Oop. And then finally, save relevant reference web pages. Speaking of web pages that you can save, these are the references from today, and they should be found in the link to the script as links in the description. And so certainly save some of these, like the FAQs, the actual documents, the biographical sketch, or the supplement, so you have this. With that, thanks for joining me for this tips for using the new NIH Biosketch Common forms. Hopefully now you know moving forward what is expected of you, how to actually move forward on that, and have a successful grant application. Thanks for joining me. Again, I'm Mark Williamson. I will see you next time.